The Hangar Z Podcast welcomes Tony Lumpkin to the show.
And we're plus or minus 70 feet, like trying to match up the hoist. You can get seasick just watching this happen. I'm looking at the left side, watching the waves, trying to time the wave sets in. I am getting airsick as hell. I'm just disoriented on the goggles. I'm trying to maintain heading. And next thing I know, I see the RMI compass just starting to swing. I'm like, whoa, are we losing the instrument? No. They were so shallow that the tow cable from the IVIC to the Cullick had snagged on the bottom and swung this ship 90 degrees while we're over top of it.
On today's episode of the Hangar Z Podcast, Jack Schonely and guest host Bryan Smith are honored to have Tony Lumpkin, call sign Lumpy, for a compelling conversation. Tony brings a truly unique aviation background, having flown multiple airframes across military and civilian sectors. A graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, Tony was commissioned into the U.S. Marine Corps, where he piloted the CH-46 and completed 3 tours in Iraq. He shares some of the incredible experiences and lessons learned from flying in the sandbox. He later transferred into the U.S. Coast Guard, where he piloted a Black Hawk conducting high-risk rescues. But his story doesn't end there. After his military service, Tony invited Bryan to join him on a one-of-a-kind flying assignment, piloting a helicopter off a luxury cruise ship in one of the most stunning and unforgiving places on Earth, Antarctica. A big thank you to Bryan Smith for leading this insightful conversation with his friend Lumpy. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the Hangar Z Podcast. We appreciate your support. Thank you to our sponsors, Spectre Lab Incorporated, Robinson Helicopter Company, and Precision Aviation Group.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
We're doing sections of 2. We fly in sections of 2. We fly out of Kuwait, and in the beginning, we were still pushing through Nazarene. We just gone through Nazarene, and there still looks like combat all around it. And we didn't have very good maps. Our maps ended at Nazarene, so going up Highway 1. And so these sections of 2 would link up with battalion headquarters or regimental headquarters. And then we would do the medevacs face to face. So hey, we just got a call in. I need you to launch your helicopters, go there, and then take them back to the rear and come back here. And it was super dynamic. Again, we're making this up as we go along. And so this big schmall happens, which is that big wall of sand. If you ever see the movies, that is real, and it happens. And we were stuck just north of Nazarene at this regimental headquarters for a couple days. Sand everywhere, some crazy orange glow. Everything is covered. It's really probably not healthy for you. And the sand in Iraq is like ash, if you've ever heard of it. It floats because it's so old, because it's been rubbed really fine. So the sand, it just gets it everywhere. And I think I still have it in my foot locker. There's sand everywhere. Anyway, this says floats. But combat's still happening. And so they finally came to us. I think it cleared up to the point where I could see both ends of the helicopter at the same time. And they come out to us and they said, hey, we have a couple guys that are hurt pretty bad. One's got a bullet in his spine. Would you be willing to take these guys back? Because we were 100 miles north at that point. I mean, they're not going to drive back, not with a bullet in the spine. So they're like, okay, well, we'll give it a shot. That's what we do. All right. There's no minimums in war zone. And so we load up, and they had a bunch of walking wounded too that had kind of accumulated over a couple of days, and they were trying to get these guys back. Plus we had an embedded reporter, and I've got two corpsmen, or 2 corpsmen, 2 door runners, 2 pilots. I mean, it is a fully loaded frog. And we take off, and we get to about 100 feet, lost sight, and lost an engine. Boom. All right, engine flame out. Followed, there was this chunk of this wet, because it had rained as well in the desert. So this wet mud went through the engine, flamed out the engine. And yes, twin engine helicopter, a lot of power. One engine, not so much power. Not when you're fully loaded gas, people. So we lost an engine, and I'm drooping turns immediately at less than 100 feet, doing 70 knots and 70 feet. And I'm like, we're going down. And so I did a controlled run on into the desert. I was on the controls, of course. lucky me. And we did this landing in the desert, which looks great until you find out the desert isn't as flat as you think it is. We hit a sand dune, put the right main mount through a sand dune. There's a big gouge in the sand dune. Slews the helicopter 90 degrees. Come to a screeching halt in the desert. There's a berm from 100 years ago, built up for some reason. That's right under the chin bubble. If we'd gone any further, we probably would have knocked the nose wheel landing gear off. So we just this whole dynamic, crazy landing in the sand. And we shut it down. We get everybody off and clean out the shorts. But now we're a mile or two outside the wire, right? We are on our own. There's nobody out there, and we're not good guys all around us. And so the helicopter comes back around, like, oh crap, what are you gonna do? It's like, well, we gotta get this guy with the bullet in his spine to the hospital. So we give that person to them, and as many as they could take with them, and they go solo and they take off into the storm. And so there we are, and it's not a good place to be. And we're like, well, we can't just sit here. We can't get a hold of anybody, of course. We don't have sat phones. We don't have any way to communicate with anybody. We're on the grounds. There's no AWACS, or at least the AWACS was not necessarily talking to us. Helicopter control was all procedural control. So you basically, hey, I'm checking at point blue. Now I'm checking at point purple. And that's how they kept track of you. And then when you don't check in, they're like, oh, we should probably look for those helicopter guys. And so it was very dynamic, and we're on the grounds. And my crew chief happens to be a quality assurance staff sergeant. He goes, hey, let me take a look at this engine. And he does a visual inspection. Of course, it's just the outside. It's a visual inspection. He's like, you know what? I don't see any damage. Maybe if we do a engine wash right here in the desert, maybe we can kind of blow it out and see if it works again. And we're like, yeah, let's do that. So we took all our drinking water and we poured it into the engine wash, and all of our drinking water. You pour that in, and we ran this thing for 15 minutes. The engine was fine. And I'm like, well, you can only imagine what happened the afternoon we got from maintenance later on. But the engine was running, and we're no longer stranded in the desert. By the time that all happens, the other helicopter had dropped off the wounded at the combat surgical hospital. It came back to meet up with us maybe half an hour later, and we're ready to go. All right, let's get out of here. Actually, we had more walking wounded on our helicopter, so let's go back to the combat surgical hospital and let's go back, and then we'll figure it out, right? So we're transiting along, and we're 50 feet, 50 knots, just because you can only see the road, Highway 1. You're kind of following the road and all the vehicles on, and that's all you can really see. It's just zero horizon. And we're trucking along, and we get to the combat surgical hospital, and we're like, okay, let's drop them off, and let's try and get back to headquarters, and then we'll call a squad, right? Because we're like, I don't want to get stranded here, because the combat surgical hospitals were constantly moving. They're like bump, 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 bump. So we dropped our walking wounded, get back in the air. Now we're heading back north, and we're south end Nazareth at this point, and we do a procedural check-in. And DASC, I think was called, can't remember what it stood for, goes, hey, I can't remember our call sign, but hey, Kazbek 1-2, would you be able to pick up 12 urgent surgicals? So there's different categories of how bad, how quickly we need to get them to the hospital to save their lives. And urgent surgical was it's as fast as you need. These guys are dying. And oh man. And we're like, well, is there anybody else available? No, you're the only helicopters in Iraq flying right now. We're like, okay, well, that narrows it down. That's us then, I guess. We talk about it, but we already knew that we had a potentially bad engine, and we already had emergency landing in the desert. We already knew that we should probably get to maintenance somehow, but you're not going to turn down a medevac like that. So we all talked about it as a crew, and we said, yeah, let's do this. And, I didn't have the map. We're like, hey, let's get to the Y intersection. Instead of going northwest, let's go northeast out of Nazareth. And again, I don't have a chart. We got a lat long, and we got a chart, and we basically get to Nazareth. We follow this road to the north towards Al Qut, and 50 feet. And I look up, and I'm on the controls again, and my lead helicopter hits a wire at 50 feet. And all I remember seeing, because you can't see anything, I just see it's one of these wires. I just see it, right? And they went right through it. This wire, steel cable, goes from the ground into the sandstorm. No idea. Turns out it's a 1,000-foot radio tower that we didn't know about. They ran right through the wire. And their first is like, oh, they're dead. And next thing I know, there's another wire. And I did one of these. And believe it or not, I was looking up at the tower, and I'm just turning hard left to get from the wire. And believe it or not, we went through there underneath it. One wire went that way, and the tower went that way. And I'm circling around, trying not to hit any more of these wires. And I'm looking over my shoulder, and we're 50 feet. I'm looking for the smoking hole where I thought Dash 1 would be. Right. I look back and I'm like, hey, where you guys at? And they're like, hey, we're good. I'm like, no, you're not. I just saw you hit that steel cable, right? Like whatever a 1,000-foot tower steel cable looks like. I saw you hit that with your blade. Like, what the heck? And they're like, no, we're good. We're controllable. I don't have any vibrations. We're good. I'm like, and I join back up on them. And obviously it's a blade. I can't see any damage. I'm like, okay. Turns out we have these, I think they're nickel or aluminum blade tip caps. They're about a foot long on the end of our 25-foot rotor blade. And it's for erosion, right? Because your rotor's going through the sand, the fiberglass gets eroded. So they had a foot-long cap on it. And later on, that cap had a dent in it that looked like that. And that's just physics, 263 RPM. And hit that nickel cap. It was just enough energy to slice through a 5-inch diameter steel cable. And they were still flying. I mean, battle frogs, right? So they're still flying. So we got a bad engine. Now they got a bad blade. And we're like, okay, we're good. We're in it now. All right, we're committed. We get to the LZ. We fly over the LZ. Turns out, it's been ambushed, firefight, crossfire. We land the LZ, and they start loading on a bunch of really badly hurt people. And I look back, and none of them are Marines. I'm like, what? I mean, we're talking some really badly blown up Iraqi soldiers and a bunch of civilians. Her family got caught in crossfire. Turns out that there were no wounded Marines. It was all wounded Iraqis, and it's both civilians and soldiers. And, we're loading up, and you're kind of looking back, and, I see my embedded reporter, like, we're loaded. Like, all the litters are loaded with these guys. They're all torn up. And then the embedded reporter sitting kind of where I could see in the left seat. I was in the right seat and looking back, and he's got a girl in his arms and no legs, like totally. And it's this reporter's holding this girl, right? She had her leg blown off. And, it's just bleeding everywhere. It's just a very traumatic moment. And you're like, oh, well, this is for real. I'm sitting there, and then I look out to my right, and remember that blinking light I told you about? I'm like, oh, great. There's more blinking lights over there. So they're still shooting at us from the tree line. On the right door guard, he gets on it, and then, we pull out of there. Luckily, we didn't get hit. So we're flying out of there, and now my bad engine, the other guy's bad helicopter. We're all on bingo fuel at this point. We hadn't refueled yet. After all this, we're on the yellow fuel lights, trying to figure out how to get back through Nazareth to the Combat Surgical Hospital. And then the crew chief calls up and, hey, sir, this corpsman, he won't treat these guys. What do you mean he won't treat these guys? He's like, he quit. He's not doing this. I'm like, oh, okay. Is he on ICS? No, sir, he unplugged. I'm like, okay, I guess, he just refused. He just shut down. He had hit his limit. And I think, the straw that broke the camel's back was when he saw these were Iraqis that we nearly died for to get to. Iraqi soldiers and the civilians. It wasn't Marines. And they didn't tell us that on the 9-line. They didn't tell us that. Would that have changed our decision-making process? Probably, honestly.
Yeah, why wouldn't it?
Yeah. But they didn't tell us. And it was a real moment. We had a straight up rebellion, and like the other corpsman was doing the best he could, but one corpsman, he just shut down, and he never flew again after that. He shut down, like he had reached his limit. And so we're scrambling. We get back. We drop them off at the Combat Surgical Hospital, and we made it. All right, we're on fumes, and we basically go to the sort of reset pad nearby, and we shut down, and we're looking at the damage and talking about it, and I talked to the corpsman. He's like, I'm all done. Nope, I don't want to talk about it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm like, okay, fair enough. We're here. Fair enough. I go off to try and find some water, right? We didn't have any water, so I'm wandering in water. Lo and behold, guess who's got a sat phone? This reporter, right? Which would have been really helpful earlier. So I get back, and he goes, hey, where were you? I just talked to your mom. What? Excuse me? So he had called in his report on the sat phone to the radio station in Sacramento, California, which is why he was on my helicopter, I think, and done a full report of everything we had just done. Like, this is like week 1 of the war, right? I hadn't talked to anybody in my family yet since I left. No way to. They had shut down all that. He just basically went through the whole story I just told you, and they called my mom and said, hey, you want to talk to your son? And I wasn't there, right? So they ended up talking to her, and they hung up. By the time I got back, it was over, and I didn't know how to feel about that, to tell you the truth. But it was not a good feeling of like, holy crap, my mom just heard that, and you're still trying to process it yourself, and now she gets this out of context. Really tough. My mom definitely got some more gray hairs. Those couple of tours, God bless her. But
I can't imagine why you picked that as a impactful mission.
It was it sticks with you.
Tony, our time is flying by, and you still have like 3/4 of your career so we're gonna.
I'll be more succinct, I promise.
No. There's so much to talk about, and I want to get to it. The nature of the podcast is very much public safety based. So I want to, you got out of the Marine Corps, bought a sailboat, and tried your hand as a pirate.
Failed miserably.
Came back and
he did Puerto Vallarta, right? I made it to Puerto Vallarta.
Came back and did some civilian flying, flew tours, did some stuff on the oil rig, but you went back in the Coast Guard. What motivated you to go back and back into the Coast Guard?
Yeah, those 2 years after the Marine Corps, and I got back after the third tour, I bought the sailboat. I was planning on falling off the face of the earth. I wasn't in a good headspace. Luckily, I met my wife right before I left San Diego and disappeared into the horizon. And she convinced me that, there were some good reasons to come back. And I did. And, I'll always be grateful to Cammie, my wife, for being there when I needed somebody to be there. Then we did the tours of the Grand Canyon, which was a beautiful spot, flying a Lone Ranger, but there's no money in that. It's hard to have a future. They did offer me a safety officer job. Imagine that. But it's, there was nothing there for Cammie, and it's just not where we were going to end up. Got the job for offshore oil, which paid more, but it's cost more to live in California, so we're still not making any progress, not getting ahead. And I had applied to the Coast Guard because I heard about their search and rescue mission, and I really, in the end, when we were both assault support, I did plenty of assault support, putting troops in zones, and as well as medevacs. But medevac calls to you. Like, you have to be a special kind of crazy to do the medevac mission. And the life flight guys get this too. You feel really good at night, and you look in that mirror and going, hey, I did what I could to help people out. And everybody has that different way. So I loved looking in the mirror and going, hey, you're an idiot, but you were helpful today. Like, you helped some people out, right? And not everybody made it, of course, but you tried, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt good. And after flying tours over the Grand Canyon and offshore oil, I was just taking people to work and doing tours. It just felt empty to me. I wasn't getting paid a lot because, it was just hard. And so it felt empty. And I got the opportunity to do what's called a direct commission aviation transfer to the Coast Guard, where they take anybody with less than 10 years of service in another branch, and they'll direct commission you over to be a line pilot in the Coast Guard. The beauty of the program is you get to be a line pilot. The bad part is I was a major in the Marine Corps, and I got reset to lieutenant junior grade in the Coast Guard. So there's a bit of a humility check there.
Yeah.
A very awkward, weird position. But a lot of us do it. But I think a third of Coast Guard pilots are from other services, mostly Army, and a smattering of Navy and Air Force, and a few Marines. Right?
How many years did you end up in the Coast Guard then?
I did 13 years, actually.
13 years?
Longer than the Marine Corps. So it took me about that long to get over being a Marine. But some will say. But no, I learned a ton about myself and what the Coast Guard does. It is a mission that nobody understands and nobody aware. There's plenty of jokes about puddle pirates and how it's not a real service. It is. I was more scared more times in the Coast Guard in a helicopter than I ever was in Iraq.
Tell us about some of those missions, those hairy missions.
Okay,
I know you got a couple.
To the point. All right, I'll speed it up.
I know you have some great stories that people would like to hear
doozies
about.
For sure.
thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Well, everybody wants to hear about Alaska, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of really dangerous air stations, Cape Cod out the Northwest, even Elizabeth City, North Carolina goes out in the hurricanes in the Atlantic all the time. The Pacific Northwest is a really dangerous place, which is why you have Coast Guard air stations there, right? San Diego, even, fairly benign SoCal, do a lot of migrant and drug interdiction work there, which, maybe you could say that for another time because there's a ton of CBP interaction and trying to figure out with local law enforcement how to interact. I could talk for hours about that. But even then, that pea soup fog and, and I think I told you about the 1705 mid-air collision with the Cobra killed the C-130 crew and a Cobra crew, and we witnessed and responded to, which is a terrible mid-air tragedy. But the craziest stories are Alaska, and it is everything you think it is and more. Those who have flown to Alaska can attest to this. You really have to be there to understand how big it is and how much the weather just doesn't care about you at all, because it just goes and goes and goes, and you're in it and you're watching it happen. So we had a bunch of them, but one of my first real big missions was the first year I was there. So I was an aircraft commander coming out of San Diego, and you have to be an aircraft commander to go to Alaska to require that experience. And then your first year in Alaska, you were a co-pilot learning what you don't know. So I was a co-pilot that first year, which means you're in the right seat. So they put the co-pilots in the right seat for the hoist, because as crazy as those hoists are, it's way easier than being the aircraft commander who's watching fuel, comms, situational awareness, danger. Like it's hard. Like it's a lot to go on. So my job was in the right seat, mostly to hoist and to fly the aircraft as much as possible. And so it's Christmas 2012. Everybody's on Christmas leave, so we're at minimal staffing. We always are staffing the Coast Guard. But, as people are gone, I come in for my routine trainer, right? So I'm not on leave, but every 3 days you rotate in, go do a law enforcement patrol or practice ILS or something and kind of stay fresh. And so I came in at 8 a.m. to do my routine trainer, we call him RT. And ops grabs us and says, "Hey, just stand by. There might be something brewing." I'm like, "Well, I'm not on duty." But we usually have one duty crew because we just have minimal manning in the Coast Guard. There's 5 helicopters, H-60 helicopters in Kodiak that covers an area that goes from San Francisco to Texas to the Canadian border. Like, you can do the math. Like, if you look at these flat maps, people don't understand. Like, Alaska is gigantic, and we covered it with 5 helicopters. So some of these missions were 1,000 miles, 1,200 miles. And so we'd have one duty crew at Kodiak and 1 or 2 deployed forward operating bases. And then usually if we had a big mission brewing, they would just call pilots up going, "Hey, you available? Can you come in?" And you say yes if you can. And so we were it. We're the backup crew. Okay, all right. So he's like, "Go home, chill out and rest." I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to go home and take a nap at this point. I mean, I got 3 babies at home and now I'm wired up because something's brewing." And it moves forward. So what had happened is the Mobile Offshore Drilling Unit, MODU, Cullick, you can look it up. It's a pretty big case and a pretty big deal from 2012, was in the north. They had just authorized offshore drilling on the North Shore of Alaska, right? Big deal in 2012. And it had been years in the making. They had these special rigs that were kind of round bottomed, slough the ice, and they can kind of drill, and they moved around quite a bit. But anyway, they had moved these things down to Dutch Harbor, which is, if you look at Alaska, there's, the Lower Peninsula and Kodiak and Dutch Harbor way out here in the Aleutians Islands, and here's the Arctic, right? So they're over here. And they're trying to move this thing down to Seattle for the winter. Lots of reasons behind that. I won't get into the details, but not all of them were as legit as we had hoped. But they were moving this thing, and the offshore tug Iviq, AIVIQ, was pulling this thing, right? 4 diesel engines, tows this 24,000 ton, I think it is, offshore drilling unit. And they're trying to move this thing from Dutch down to Seattle. But one of the biggest storms in Alaska in 70 years hits while they're underway. And they're basically hurricanes. And people don't realize in Alaska, we get hurricanes all the time. That's just Alaska. They're just not very warm. It's dynamic, it's dangerous, it's crazy. This ship got into it. They were having engine problems, and they just happened. And they'd already had several other ships try to go over there and give them relief tows and throw them a line. One of the Coast Guard cutters got a line fouled, so they fouled a prop, so they had to limp back. I mean, it was a massive effort going on. And, we're the last resort, right? Because by the time you start pulling people off those boats, like those ships are gone, most likely. So we're the last resort, and we're the nearest help. And this ship, Ivik, basically is just on the south side of Kodiak Island, which is actually a really big island. It's the second biggest island after the big island in Hawaii in the United States. So it's a big island. It's like a 45-minute transit to get out to these guys. Nobody likes to call for help in the daylight. Everybody sings at night, apparently. So they didn't want to give up the Ivik, or they didn't want to give up the Kulik. And so they didn't want to turn it over to federal ownership, basically, until they had to. But they couldn't get away from the shoal water. And so they called us. They said, all right, it's 18 guys on the rig itself that's being towed by this 187-foot Ivik. And they want to get those 18 guys off. And so you're it, right? So the H-60 in the Coast Guard has got a lot of big fuel tanks and gear, and we don't have a big cabin. It's a lot different than the slicks you see in the Army. So they can fit like 20 guys in the back of that thing. It gets tight after 6 or 7. So they sent 2 of us out there, staggered by 30 minutes. And the storm's hitting, right? So we're at maybe 300-foot ceilings. It's blowing over 50. Like the sea state is obnoxious. And it's pitch dark, right? And you're on the goggles. So we're the second one to go out. The first one goes out. They come around Cape Chiniak, and they get almost flipped over by the crosswind. So they're getting slammed. And we try to stagger by 30 minutes so we wouldn't run into each other. They get on scene, and by the time we get there, and we go with minimal fuel because we're trying to put a bunch of guys on board. They get on scene, and imagine a piñata, right? So it's a round bottom boat, no keel, right? And there's a big oil derrick in the middle, and it's doing this in like 70-foot waves. So you're trying to hover and get on the platform, which happened to be the upwind side because they ripped off the main tow bit. So they're on the emergency tow bit, which is on the backside, which is underneath the helicopter platform. So the helicopter platform was tail into the wind if you were approaching directly. It's not a great place for helicopters, So now you're trying to do a hoist in zero lume, scintillating goggles, it's just totally black. You've got this 160-foot mast, I think it is. It's like swinging around totally randomly, coming at you like a piñata. And, the waves are coming over it was all the Coast Guard things and then some. And couldn't get to them, right? First ship gets on scene. They're like, I can't get a viable hoist down. We're being go ahead and back. So we get on scene, and we know that by the time they transit back, refuel, and come back, they're going to be set onto the rocks. So we're it. Like if anybody's getting off, it's going to be with us. No pressure, right? Remember, this is my first year in Alaska, and I'm in the right seat. I'm the hoist guy. And we try everything we could, and couldn't do it. And it was, whenever you have to admit to yourselves that not only it's not that you're not good enough, it's you just physically can't do it without risking the loss of the helicopter, right? And it's a terrible feeling. Like anytime you can't help, right? And you guys know that feeling.
Yeah, that's.
And I had to make a call and say, yeah, it's terrible to just to say I can't. And in your heart, with the information you have, you're like, if I can't, nobody's going to. I actually have one and only time in my entire 13 years in the Coast Guard, I said, do your lifeboats work? Because I need you to get in them. Like, that was the only time I've ever had to do that. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And they're like, we're not getting in those things. I'm like, they're like 30-foot waves. They're not getting out there. They didn't want to get off this rig. And we're like, okay, good luck. And left. And like, oh, a terrible feeling, right? So you make the flight of shame back, your head's down, like you're just exhausted. Again, I was up to 8 a.m. We're around midnight at this point. I'm wrecked. I get back to the station, right? Ops is standing there, our chief pilot's standing there, the other crew's there, and they're like, hey, plan B is the oil company has flown in on their jet. Somehow the jet got there, I don't know. These fuel filters that were being flooded in the tow. So they're plan now is for us to turn around and fly back out to the IVIC, do a bow hoist to this distressed tow vessel, give them these fuel filters so they can just jam them in and replace them and get some engines running so the IVIC doesn't crash after all. I'm like, sure. Sounds like a great idea, right? I mean, in hindsight, I use this story all the time when I was teaching safety. I'm like, that was dumb. Like that was it, right? Because not only did you go back out to a known bad situation with little, chance of success, but I was wrecked. I was been up since 8 a.m. We're going on midnight. Now you want me to go back out for another 4 hours? The only good thing I did was admit, like, hey, I don't know if I should be in the right seat. I'm seeing double right now. And the right answer would have been like, I can't do this, but there wasn't really anybody else available. And so we swapped seats. So I'm now on the left seat. The other guy, Tom, is in the right seat. And we fly back out there. And we do these bow hoists. And we get to the IVIC. IVIC's doing one of these numbers. It's a bow helicopter pad, so we're liced. And we're plus or minus 70 feet, right? Trying to like match up the hoist. You can get seasick just watching this happen. I'm looking at the left side, watching the wave, trying to time the wave sets in. I am getting airsick as hell. Like I'm just disoriented on the goggles. I'm trying to maintain heading. And next thing I know, I see the RMI compass just starting to swing. I'm like, where, are we losing the instrument? No. They were so shallow that the tow cable from the IVIC to the Cullick had snagged on the bottom and swung this ship 90 degrees while we're over top of it. Like we should probably abort at this point. And we'd gotten enough filters on board, most of them, using the hoist basket up and down, that they were able to replace them and keep the IVIC from hitting the rocks that night. So we go back. Turns out they were able to keep it off the rocks, but they couldn't get away because of the set and storm. So 2 days later, they ended up doing what's called a soft landing on the only beach in Kodiak Island. And there's some crazy pictures of this thing beached out. And they got the guys off the next morning. And of course, we always laugh about in the press and, who got the big famous, but a couple of great guys and crews went out the next morning. They got the guys off. Obviously it's daylight. The winds are less. The waves are less. Not nearly as scary, but they got the guys off and early evacuate the Cullick and, and rescue those guys. But in the end, that was the first time I couldn't rescue them. I couldn't do it. And that stuck with me. And it was a real painful night trying to sleep. Because that night, I didn't know they were going to get off that next morning. So right. I went to bed like, what could I have done? What else could I have tried? We tried everything. And, that feeling of like, shoulda, woulda, coulda, was I good enough? Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I just didn't think of something. And that feeling is terrible. And it was a long couple of days, but, thankfully they got him off. I feel better about it. And ironically, so the other crew went to NHA later that next year. Went to that NHA conference. I don't remember what it was. Had a conversation in a bar about this story. And the guy goes, we are doing a new award called the Moral Courage Safety Award. And we want to use your crew in that mission. And so we ended up getting the Moral Courage Award for not picking those guys up.
Which is a fantastic award because truly decisions like that and the ability to make that decision, the correct decision, knowing that the correct decision may mean somebody else doesn't survive, is what truly separates the most professional aviators from the others. Because that's hard. And we've talked about it in all aspects of this. The right decision may be to say no, even though that means somebody else isn't going to survive. To make that decision is extremely difficult for people like us in this profession.
We're just not wired that way. We're not wired that way, especially when you get to that level. You will solve the problem. Yeah.
There are folded flags on the mantles of many a household, unfortunately, in family homes for people who they just couldn't make that decision. They had to go out, and you don't want to fault them. You don't want to. It's not to talk bad about them. It's a near impossible decision to make. Right. But that and as our time's kind of running out, you mentioned the safety, and that kind of dovetails in at the end of your Coast Guard career. you were in the safety world there. And that has to be a difficult balance because, again, you're talking about life-saving. If the Coast Guard can't come get you, nobody can. There's nobody left to ask for help if the Coast Guard says they can't come get you. So you have that on one side, but you also have the responsibility to operate professionally, and you can't save lives if your aircraft are destroyed and your air crews are dead. I mean, it's beyond safety. It's just it's professionalism. It's protecting the assets. So what challenges did you have in that position? Anything notable?
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is warrant. Visit contest.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the buzzword.
Yeah, I think, honestly, you're asking about, I was the safety department at the Air Station Clearwater. That's how you and I met, right across the street. You were a great resource to go, bring a different perspective as well. But, part of the problem, the Coast Guard a long time ago said, hey, you do have to go out, but you have to come back. Like the whole go out, but you don't have to come back. That was a different era. It's not very efficient. Like, let's just say that. Like, we don't have that many helicopters and crews. Like, you lose one helicopter and a crew, like that's devastating. And not that any big organization is any less devastating, but for a small 40,000 person operation like the Coast Guard with air stations of 30 pilots, and it's covering 500, 600 miles of coastline, to lose a helicopter is devastating in many, many ways, on many levels. When we talked about that, so when I was telling safety, and one of the reasons I went into safety, because I had done a lot of dumb stuff. I mean, let's be honest. Like, we haven't even touched on all the dumb things I've done.
You're welcome.
And we will, I'm sure. We talk about how you and I went to Antarctica. That was dumb.
Right.
But we did. And let's not forget to talk about that. It's important. But being able to be honest with yourself and going, I probably should have done that better or shouldn't have done that at all. And then being willing to stand up in front of another mandatory volunteer training, and you got to do another CRM training episode. I would always start with the dumbest thing I could think of that I've done that was related to the topic, which was covered pretty much all the topics. All right. So, I would stand up there and I would tell them a story, and hopefully more succinct than I've been today. But, and we'd go in there and I'd get really good buy-in right away. People are like, oh yeah, Commander Lumpkin, he's a jackass, and so am I. And he's willing to put it out there. And I think, for all the challenges in safety and, did that really make a difference? And these policies and these procedures, did they make a difference, or that would have happened anyway? And that crisis of existential crisis is always tough, right? Is what you're doing actually making a difference versus is that going to happen anyway? We'll never know. It's very hard with statistics and all that. And I was never good at that math anyway. But I could tell you when I tell them that story about the colic and how I went out, even though I knew I was wrecked and I'd been well beyond any kind of semblance of a crew day, and I may not have been at my best, and it could very easily have killed us. Guys are like, I get that. Like, I've been there, or I can see myself doing that. And I get a lot more buy-in that way. So, I was never on command track, obviously, as a weird, their commission. And I never really had that draw to be that guy, but I always felt I was hopefully more approachable because I was just honest. Like, I was just brutally honest. Some point like tactless, I think the word is, but I was brutally honest because I've always been brutally honest with myself. Like, hey, you're kind of a crappy pilot, but you get away with a lot of stuff, and there's a couple of things I could pass along,
But I think you really hit on it there. Safety is a difficult topic. I love teaching tactics courses because it's easier to engage people. They're excited to learn about that stuff. It's more fun. And you can track the success of tactics courses as well, which is something Jack knows very well because he's been doing it for forever, since we were doing law enforcement work in the first Sikorsky helicopter. But you can track
blades.
Yeah. The success of that. It was easier when there wasn't an enclosed cockpit. You just look out the side.
It's hard to keep the bowler on as well, but a hat, I've worn that hat, by the way. So.
But to do the safety stuff, you have to impact the culture. And the policies, the procedures, the posters, that's part of it. But you can make all that stuff and make zero impact on safety. You can have the manuals. You can have the mandatory meetings. You can check all those administrative boxes and make zero impact on safety. You have to impact the culture of the organization where people are doing these things because they want to, because they think it's normal, because it's professional, and they'll do it, especially the young people, because they saw someone like you doing it also. Somebody who does good work.
There's got to be buy-in, right? They got to buy in. They got to believe you as a person. Like you can't come out as a staff officer or a non-flyer, non-aviator and be able to lecture. Like you got to say, look, been there, done that. I'm not telling you what's up, but I've seen a couple of dumb things, and maybe this will save your life one day. And that simply is a great opening line. Like, hey, this might save your life one day because it almost cost me mine.
Exactly.
That's attention getter.
Exactly.
Really quick.
And like you say, if you go out and you're preachy, like you dumbasses, you're going to kill yourselves. You need to do this because I said so, and that's it. They may do it just to avoid getting in trouble.
Right.
But that's it.
That's not the right reason.
And only when they think that they're going to get caught.
Yeah.
So
it's not a true buy-in.
Right.
No,
It's a phony buy-in.
Exactly.
And it's not good enough,
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
I think that's what we saw in Antarctica.
Yeah.
So here, I'll do this. I'll do the segue for us because I know you and I need to talk about our time in Antarctica, right? But the same thing when we were operating out that ship in Antarctica, right? The wildest frontier, the least amount of regulation, and the least amount of understanding of the risks that we were taking for the amount of game that we're getting. And, the battles that I fought to try and convince people that we've got to change how we're doing this, otherwise it could really be cost us lives, if not revenue, was eventually why I left. I mean, that's eventually why after a year of that, I was like, I don't think I could really change the fundamental nature of this operation. Even though people like, you don't have to fly, you don't have to go in this bad weather. There's no pressure there, but there was a perceived underlying, hey, we're here to make money. And if you're not flying, we're not making money. And, they fundamentally didn't want to put the work in to, follow the emergency response plan, to do the drills, to, designate quality people to be the ones that are on the helo deck, and not that they weren't, we had some great people on the helo deck eventually, but yeah, like trying to get that buy-in, especially in a place like Antarctica, you have to, at some point as a pilot going, I'm out. And that's what I did.
And I mean, it was amazing. The area was amazing. It was flying. There, like you said, there's no air traffic control, but there's no search and rescue.
Nope.
If you need help, nothing's coming to find you, except for maybe a Zodiac from the cruise ship that was,
so maybe we should give some background here because people are like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. Like it's just research helicopters down there,
right? Why would these idiots be doing this? Is what everybody's thinking right now.
All right, so
paint a picture here of what you were doing.
All right, so I had an invitation after I retired from the Coast Guard in 21. There was about 30 seconds where I considered going to a non-flying job, and I was miserable. My wife's like, "No, forget it. You're not going to do that." I'm like, "Okay, good." She bought in. I don't think she bought in on what I did find out was a former Marine of mine who served with me in Iraq, found me on LinkedIn and actually said, "Hey, I am an A&P mechanic for an Italian yacht company, helicopter company, who needs somebody with Arctic experience. And, by the way, is a good guy and can be relied on and to be tactful and interact with high asset individuals."
And you checked most of those boxes.
You've been telling us, I've got an issue with that. You've been telling us how non-tactful you are, and now that's one of the requirements of this new job. What's up with that, Tony?
It was. So I can fake it to make it, trust me.
It's a 70% pass on the checklist.
70% solution.
Understood.
Bottom the barrel scraping kind of thing. So this is like the height of COVID, and I'm like trying to figure out a job, and this is 2021. And they flew me out to Italy, and it was as shady as it gets. This was a high asset helicopter company flying an EC-135, beautiful luxury Bose headsets, the whole 9 yards, Garmin 850s, everything going on. They flew me out to Sicily. They threw me in this thing that I'd never flown before and said, all right, fly us out to that island. I'm like, well, you better start it because I don't know how to do that, which is easy because it's switch. God love Eurocopter. We take off. It's like an A-star, right? And then, we ended up doing these flights around with the chief pilot sitting in the left seat who spoke barely any English. He was Italian. Super experienced guy, but interesting. And basically, they're like, you're hired. I was like, okay. And then they sent me over to a different part of Italy to learn how to fly the EC-130 B4, which is another story we won't talk about. My entire 4 hours of training I got in that helicopter. And then they shipped me down to Argentina. And I went down to Argentina, a place called Ushuaia on the southern tip. We met the ship, beautiful ship. It's a luxury cruise liner for high asset individuals typically, who basically want the mega yacht, super yacht experience without buying your own yacht. It had 2 helicopters on board, had a submarine on board. It's got Zodiac. When they're in Antarctica, they had these PhD level guides and nature naturalists and jet skis and all the toys and hot tubs and 5-star restaurants. And it was gorgeous. I mean, it was amazing. And we got there at the height of COVID. So the ship hadn't sailed in 2 years. It had been sitting in mothballs. It was crazy. And so my job was to fly tours off the back of this ship when it made the transit from Ushuaia down across the Drake Passage, 800 miles to the tip of Antarctica, because Antarctica's got this big peninsula here. It's got this big peninsula, right? So Ushuaia is like this. We'd sail down and hit the Antarctic Circle and hit some of the historic sites and come back. And that was the beginning of the job. That ship sailed around the whole world, but that was my introduction to shipboard commercial flying.
Yeah, and it's the scenery is indescribable. And there's no air traffic control. There's nothing. So we get into an area. Tony and I get together, and there's certain treaty agreements. You won't fly close to penguin colonies treaty, and all that. But other than that, we'd stand on the deck and go, "Hey, should we fly around that mountain and come back down this pass? Yeah. Let's see what." Yeah. Or there's some clouds over there. Let's fly that way and see what it looks like. And as you're flying, you're like, "This is incredible." And then I remember Tony giving the presentation to the guides who ran the Zodiacs, because they were going to be our search and rescue if we went down. And only Tony and I wore the dry suit. And he said, "Hey, if we go down, the raft that's in here is very difficult to get out of the aircraft. The water is cold. You need to get to it as soon as possible." Then Tony had to show me how to put on a dry suit. And then he said, "Hey, with these water temperatures," which we later got to experience doing the polar plunge, which was one of the dumbest things I've ever done in my life. He said, "You'll have 15, 20 minutes. And I was like, the Zodiac's going to take way longer than that to get to us. So I'm just going to have time to float in the water and think about how miserable I am before I freeze to death." I said,
regret your life decisions at that point. That's why I said, "Man, if you're going to go down, hit hard, because I don't want to live away from this bitch." It was a really crazy time. And I did drag Bryan down there because getting the right pilots into that situation with the availability and the skill set required was hard. Like, I got to the company and they're like, "Hey, do you know any more pilots with your skill set?" I'm like, "Yeah, but they're all still in the Coast Guard or will never come down here." And then I thought of Bryan. I'm like, well, he's crazy like I am. So maybe I'll give him a call, because he had the ASAR experience. I was really grateful because it's a very isolated experience, right? Because you're a pilot, there's maybe another pilot or two and a mechanic on board, and the rest of the crew, they're all great. Now, they're super nice people and by and large, and everybody's motivated to be there. But like, you're sitting there contemplating the risks that you're taking, and you're like, I have a VFR aircraft with a minimal instrument setup, but no instrument approaches to think of anyway. And I don't have any anti-ice or de-ice on the EC-130. And there's no real weather forecasting here other than wide area forecasts that came off of some, researchers' websites. Is this the right thing to do? Am I making the right call? So when, I had some real headbutting with some of the other, another pilot that was there and the chief pilots and some of the crews are like, and they were supportive. Like, "Hey, you don't have to fly. Don't fly if it's dangerous. But at some point we need you to fly. Because that's what the guests are here for, right?" And so, like, just trying to find that balance of scheduling and timing and weather decisions and some of the maintenance issues and some of the emergency response things that I ended up tackling. It was really awesome to have Bryan down there because, he's, believe it or not, he's a very thoughtful person and a lot of experience. And he really was a great sounding board to say, I hear what you're saying, Tony, but do you really want to do that? And I'm like, you're right. Let's find another way. And so he was down there for over a month, I think. Right in the beginning, I did one trip down, did all the things wrong, found out what was happening, made up a bunch of SOPs, and he showed up, I think, the second half. And I think he did 2 trips down with us.
Yeah.
And, it was awesome because it's all balanced with how awesome it is, right?
Right.
Let's be honest.
Right.
It was awesome. It was amazing. It was beautiful. You knew that nobody else flew where you're flying. You knew it. Okay, maybe a research helicopter off of one of their stations 300 miles that direction might have come by at some point. But, we were truly I think we were the first cruise ship commercial helicopter tour flights in Antarctica. For better or for worse, lots of debates on that, by the way. But we're the first ones to pull it off.
It was like being the first explorers on another planet. There was nothing there. And you fly over places like no human has ever walked here. I think a takeaway from it, as you're talking, a lot of times when we make these decisions in aviation, people think the people who are saying we can't go or we shouldn't do it, there's this immediate, I think, urge, especially from non-aviators, to mark them as not being brave enough or being chicken or not being willing to take the risk. And here we're talking about a guy who's done 3 tours in Iraq, done 12 years in some very challenging situations in the Coast Guard, and has been shot at and has had aircraft incidents. It's not a matter of not having the courage to do it. It is exactly like Tony said, is the risk worth the reward? And something that we've discussed before, I've always found really the check is, if we go out and do this, after having done the things we have to minimize the risk, to train our crews, and we still choose to do it, it will always carry risk. And if the worst things happen and that person dies, am I going to be comfortable going to their family and looking at their spouse and their children or their grandchildren or their parents in the eyes, handing them a folded flag and saying, it was still the right choice. It was still reasonable. It was still worth it. Often it is, and it is the dearest price we have to pay for what we're doing. Sometimes it's not. And it's not.
I think in the commercial world too. I mean, you're not going to get a folded flag in the commercial world. You're going to get an insurance payment maybe, or, he kind of jacked it up. So the FAA is going to retroactively pull his license and about no insurance because you're at fault. Thanks for the widow, right? So that's tough.
You may have just kind of answered part of this, Bryan, but I'd like to get both of your perspectives because you both said it. You both have said the awesomeness of it. I mean, and that influence, that's not life-saving. That's not medevac. That's not a law enforcement mission. This is a commercial operation for awesomeness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
And it's not just for the passengers, because both of you just said it. So the pilots in this case are enthralled in this awesomeness as well. Talk about how you balance that.
I think what happens is you start thinking about the what ifs eventually. Maybe not in the beginning. I mean, before I got there, I thought about the what ifs. When I was sitting there, I thought about the what ifs. And then I started flying. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yes.
It was totally worth it. And by the 4th time I'd done that, 4 trips to Antarctica, it was still awesome. Don't get me wrong. But there was a couple of times where I was like, oh, that didn't go very well. Or, I went lost comm. You ever been lost comm in Antarctica? Remember that story, Bryan? Lost comm in Antarctica with the fog dropping down to 50 feet off the water in a non-de-icing anti-ice VFR helicopter is not a very comfortable place to be. And that really hit me, and it should have hit me earlier. I mean, look, I'm a safety guy, a military safety officer, and I still went down that rabbit hole of I can see blue sky over there, and it's a 3,000 feet-ish, above 1,000 feet. So we got 3 miles of viz. We're technically legal, and there's a TV camera crew from Australia that they really want me to fly, and this is kind of the last fly day, and would you mind just, give them a quick tour out that way? And you're like, And, and you do it, you get out, and then you turn around, and then that sucker roll's gone, right? And now you're on the other side of that peninsula.
Yeah.
And in that moment, with a camera in my face, by the way, if you actually watch the footage, they put it on a TV show down in Australia, and everybody's like, wow, you were so calm, cool, collected. I'm like, did you realize I was contemplating where to put down on the glacier because we couldn't get back to the ship at this? That's what I was in my head. My face was like, Antarctica is a wonderful experience, and I really hope you get the chance to come down and enjoy this with us. But in my head, I was like, we're going to die. We just got in a pickle, and it's my fault. It's my fault. Like, I put us there. I said yes. And
you're on point, though, with this. I don't mean to cut you off, but what you said, having us both there, because we had these conversations, and there were days when we started the conversation, we weren't sure if we were going to fly or not. And at the end of the conversation, because we were able to bounce the ideas off each other, we made a good decision on whether or not we should fly, not just one motivated by the willingness to go out and fly. And, and that goes back, we talk about flight risk assessment tools and things like that, the benefit of having someone else to talk to. Also, there was a far less risk after Tony got there, because he was put in the same situation that he was when he first got to Iraq. They gave him this aircraft. They said, just go fly around, just fly circles and land and take off here. That was pretty much all the planning. And he had to go in with all of his experience and say, no, we need this safety equipment. We need to change the approach path to the ship from this to this for this reason. We need to brief the people in the boats on how to pick us up. We need to change the communication processes. He set up a whole program on his own that took that risk and made it far less. It could have been even better had they listened to him a little bit more. And one of the reasons I was there is to have, when we would fly, if there was any question about the weather, one of us was just the standby search and rescue guy with the second helicopter, because there was 2 helicopters on the boat. They didn't do that in the other tours, but in Antarctica, there had to be 2 of us, and whoever wasn't flying would pre-flight the other aircraft and just be waiting there if something happened and they needed to go out. So all of these things happen. Now, at the end, there's still a lot of risk for questionable reward. Yes, we're not saving lives. The experience, Jack, I'll tell you, I had 2 grown adults in the back of the helicopter openly weeping because they were so overcome with how beautiful it was. I think it was. I don't think it was my flying.
I think it was your flying, Bryan. I cried every time I flew with you. I mean, geez.
Oh, no.
Trying to teach this guy how to land on a boat. Are you kidding me? I was like in the fetal position. I'm like, go for it.
Our pilot spells Bryan with a Y.
It was crazy. Yeah, I mean, the response is like you feed off of that. Like it is a great feeling to be able to give that experience to people and know that it's a 1 in a million chance. And it's not all high asset individuals. I mean, there were people, retirees, who basically spent their entire life savings to go down. Mm-hmm. They were not rich people. They just saved up their $40,000 and they went all in on this Antarctica trip. And, I loved it. And they like, this was so worth it. And knowing that your 30-minute flight after the 8-day float and the probably 2 weeks it took to get there, like that was the highlight of their entire life savings. I'm like, that's a pretty awesome feeling to be a part of. And the other part of me is like, we lose an engineer, you're not going home. But this is crazy.
And I think there needed to be more honesty with the passengers on that. If they want to make that decision, you and I can make that decision for ourselves. And I had this conversation once with an air crew member that, we flew over the water every day. He didn't want to wear his vest. I said, if we go down in this water and you don't have your vest on, you're not getting it on in the time it takes to get out. You're drowning. Yeah. So tell you what, you go get a letter and have your wife and your daughter sign it saying they understand you're not wearing your vest. And if we go in the water, you'll probably die and they're okay with it. And if you get that letter to me,
that's legit.
That's a safety officer.
Holy cow!
Then I'm okay with that. Then I know not only you but your family are okay with that risk decision.
Yeah. So it forces you to really think about it. And there's a lot of suspension of disbelief in a lot of things that we do, right? Like there's a lot of things in the helicopter world we just wouldn't do if you really thought about it. Like, what are the real odds of survival or mishap versus what we're trying to get away with here? And at some point, the personality is just you're just okay with it. And there were certainly some points in my career I was like, I don't care. Like there were some times, especially in Iraq, where I'm like, whatever. Like you just got to that point in your head. And that's why it's important to have good peer group, good family support. Like people, it's not just you buying in. It's everybody's got to buy in. You know, it's your family's got to buy in. Yeah. You know, your best friends have got to buy in on what you're doing. And if they can reach out to you going, hey, you know what? We're okay if you're not an Antarctica cruise ship flying, Mediterranean, Greenland, Iceland flying pilot. Like, that's okay. Like you have done your job. You're a hero to your kids for the rest of your life, even if you sit at home on the couch the rest of your life. Like you don't need to do that. And that's, you know, that was a big difference to me to finally say, you know, it's okay to hang it up. It's okay. And it was a big part of that. Like that last hurrah is kind of what I'm calling it. And my wife definitely is like, I don't want to talk about that year. Like, I'm glad you got it out of your system. Hey, thank you for doing that. Thanks for being home now and making a change for us. And that's what really made a difference.
Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third-generation Night Sun series high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights.
Bryan, what was the result of your vest story with that crew member?
He called me some names. They were one syllable words. And he did not get that letter, but he wore his vest every single flight after that.
Mission accomplished.
We never talked about it again.
Yeah, mission accomplished. Yeah. You know what? Some people need to hear it the hard way. The easy way is just laying out the facts, laying out like you did. Hey, you know, if this happens, if this happens, this is not going to be a good outcome. You do realize that. Yep, I'm accepting that risk. Or is your family risk accepting it? I love that you did that to him because. Let me ask you this, Bryan. Was it policy to wear it?
No. And
so it was an option.
It was an option.
Okay. So
I told him,
safety officer, why was that an option?
They did not want to rock the boat.
Oh, geez. That's not a reason.
No,
you two know that's not a reason.
Like the supervisors. I wasn't in charge. I told them, I'm PIC. I'm PIC of this aircraft. I'm responsible. We have a vest. We're going to be over the water. I know if we go down in it and you don't have that on, you're not going to make it. I do care about you, but even if I didn't, I really care about your family. You are my responsibility.
Yep.
So as long as we're flying in this aircraft, you're my responsibility. This is what it's got to be. You know, and again, you know, it may be that conversation, just like we were saying, it's that sounding board. You have to keep people around you and be willing to bounce ideas off of them and to talk to them and have people that you trust their opinion. I think that's one of the whole things with this podcast is just opening up that community so you can get a phone call from somebody and say, hey, I listened to you guys talking about this. This is what they're asking me to do. What do you think?
And we get those calls. We get those calls and emails.
You bet.
Yeah, we do.
And then the conversation is not just you and me, but I'm going to tell you what I think, and I know 3 other people that you need to call too.
Yeah,
and that's where the good decisions come from.
That's right. We all have stories of things that we were asked to do and said, I don't think so. And here's the following 10 reasons, you know. But I love that, that you did it that way. That's what the supervisor should have done. But again, a lot of supervisors don't have the aviation background, and even ones that do sometimes aren't safety oriented. I mean, I can make a list.
Yeah.
Where they were, you know, they might've been pretty good supervisors, but they when it came to safety, they didn't have the safety mindset at all. And you two guys are really into safety. You know what I'm talking about. There's a safety mindset. Mine changed over the years from a safety officer. I give him full credit. Marco Bolanos.
Great guy.
He changed me dramatically in the world of safety thinking and thinking ahead of, well, what if? Things that seemed like, Marco, are you kidding me? You're bugging me about that? And he goes, hold on, Jack. This is why I'm bugging you about that, because this, and this could lead to this. And I'm like, geez. I was dismissive, almost rudely dismissive. And what I learned was he's right. He's right. And he changed me single-handedly. But we all know that we've worked with people that will not change. You could say anything to them, give them all the facts, all the data, all the stats, and they're not in that mindset. So good for you for standing up and doing that, despite the fact that it should have been done at policy, because it's just silliness that it's not. If you're flying over water, come on,
Yeah. The idea that you're going to get your survival vest on from 500 feet, 800 feet, 1,000 feet.
Not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And that's a lot of things, I still do audits at places where, the use of the helmet is optional.
Yeah.
It's like, why would it be optional?
Because the chance of crashing are so low, Bryan.
Yeah. And they know if they make it mandatory, certain people will complain. So we'll make it optional. It's their choice.
Hey, go be a patrol officer.
Yeah.
Patrol has openings. Patrol has openings. This is part of our safety program. And if you don't like that because, it's uncomfortable, it's hot in the summertime, hey, patrol has openings.
Well, that's part of it. I think the real challenge is for us, old guys, just you, Bryan, not me, old guys, is we do have a ton of experience. How do you convey that to the younger pilots that are healthy? Like, they don't have bad backs. They don't have bad necks like we do.
Yep.
They haven't seen buddies die yet, perhaps. They haven't seen near misses that we've seen. And, how do you not come across as lectury, right? Like you said, when I'm telling your sea stories, you don't want to bore them and you don't want to scare them off, right? Sometimes they just got to learn the hard way, but you don't want them to die doing it or praying an airplane when you're doing it.
That's right.
So you got to find that balance. And it comes from, I'm not older and wiser. I'm older and I know more people, right? I know more people who can maybe find another way to talk to that individual or come up with some reasonable compromises, or just talk about, like, here's some of the facts. And, you don't necessarily have to read all this stuff, but, this guy over here, he agrees with me. And this guy over here, he does a lecture series on that. And here's some videos of what happens if you don't. And you just got to find a way to reach out, because you never want to give up on your young pilots, right? But at some point, like, you're wrong. We're doing it this way. And, obviously it's different in the military because there are, very strict policies. And, typically when the boss says, this is how we're doing it, okay, that's how you do it. But there's always pushback, but definitely saw that in commercial aviation, Grand Canyon or offshore oil or off the ship, where people, even our own chief pilot didn't agree all the time with what I was pushing. It wasn't a priority. And so I basically had to convince, some of our younger pilot. We had a very young pilot flew with us, great stick, nice guy. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And he was typically open to these conversations, but he had no idea. Like, he just never thought about some of these risks, never thought about it. And when I started making a big deal about it, he's like, why are you making a big deal, man? Don't rock the boat. They're going to fire you. I'm like, you know what? Some things are worth being fired over.
Yep.
It's worth getting into a battle over, because I want you to grow up to have a family. I mean, you're a grown man, but I want you to have a future here. I don't want you to be the one that finds yourself in my situation where I'm lost calm at low level and freezing ice fog and limited options, and I don't know what to do. I don't want to find that. So I think safety is about relationships. Like, it's not lecturing. It's about having that trust that you can build. And, the best chief pilots are the ones that you don't necessarily like, but you're willing to listen to because they got some good stuff to say. I wasn't always the most popular guy. I was a jackass a lot of times, so let's be honest. But I think a lot of people listened, and I always tried to do my best to give them good things to listen to.
And Tony, you know this because that's the reason you reached out to Bryan to get on that Antarctica gig. And a lot of our listeners know this, but Bryan was gifted at that, what you just described.
Still is.
He is. He's really gifted at that. He had a way of making safety classes interesting and where the audience was receptive, because he didn't lecture them and yell at them or say, you have to do this and you have to change that. He did exactly what you just described, Tony. He laid out the data, and he laid out the what ifs, and laid out the realities and the experience that he had and others that he gathered and was able to change things in a positive way. And that's what a good safety officer does. And let's face it, there's not all safety officers can do that. They can maybe do certain parts of that safety job, but convincing a young pilot that hasn't seen what you've seen to follow something is challenging. And that's why I gave Mark Bolano's credit. He did that to me. He did it to others too. That's maybe the most important job of safety, is convincing, getting the buy-in, getting the culture change without going, sticking your finger in people's faces and making them feel stupid. And, Bryan's good at that.
You're far too kind, and I'm now I owe you more money, Jack. But,
I know you do, but
just put on my tab.
My Venmo is still, you've got my Venmo.
But I'll throw it right back at you. I mean, I think that's any good instructor. And I watched you for years before I started instructing. If you can tie it in, like you said, Tony, to personal experiences and to the operational success, because let's face it, we all get into this job because of the operation that we want to do. We don't get into it. We don't become helicopter pilots because we have a passion for safety. We would do something different. And
that's good. That's a good line.
And we go into these jobs because we want to chase bad guys, and we want to find lost people. We want to do the mission, even if it's seeing something beautiful, and sharing that with people. We want to do that. And a good instructor like Jack would always teach tactics, but he would have a story. He would have a mission, a caper, as he always called it. And I love that. And then tie in the instructional element into that story. And that would let the student know, hey, if I listen to this guy, I can also do those awesome things. It's not just about receiving instruction anymore. It's about learning how to do that. And I want to do that. Or sometimes in safety, I don't want to do that. Because if I do that, then I can't do the other fun stuff. And you tie that into the operational success and the passion of why people are there. People come into your classroom. Why are they here? What do they want to do? And that makes people, like Jack and like you, Tony, successful as instructors to get people to listen and change that culture over time. I think we are running out of time, Jack.
Yeah, I've been watching the clock. I'm like, it's not my fault now. You guys are talking. But I showed up at 2 hours. So
this is good. This is good. This is a good time to get some final thoughts, Bryan. A question or final thoughts for Tony before we wrap up.
I've hit on all the major parts. I think outside of the obvious, exciting and interesting war stories that you have in all the parts of your career, the underlying message of being able to think dynamically and come up with a plan and think outside of the box is an important skill in this industry. And I know you also had stories responding to hurricanes and stuff where there should be a plan. There's basically no plan. And to be able to come up with a good plan that's not only operationally effective, but protects the personnel and assets by lowering the risk as much as possible to get that operational effectiveness is an important skill set that we need to focus on and appreciate in the industry. Otherwise, people are going to get hurt, missions aren't going to get accomplished, or stuff's going to get damaged, which happens quite often. And it's a leadership skill that I don't think is quite appreciated in an industry where the number one leadership skill that people seem to celebrate is the ability to just say yes no matter what. Yep. And that's not good leadership. So you've shown that consistently throughout your career, and I think that's a good takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a lot to be gained from understanding that there are systems in place for most of what we do, right? Nobody's reinventing the wheel these days, typically. Like, there's a lot of law enforcement or search and rescue or medevac. We did invent the wheel, but not anymore. Like, there's 20 years of it. There's tons of SOPs out there, but it's really, it comes down to it's training the individuals that are on the scene, right? You've got to develop people that not only are capable of dynamic thinking and thinking outside the box or like seeing the big picture while they're in it themselves, but enabling those folks, Hurricane Dorian that I talked about with you, Bryan, the other day, where I ended up going down there and just being the Johnny on the spot. I just happened to be the senior pilot for the Coast Guard, helping with that giant storm down there. I think the only reason I was able to be successful was, one, a great team that were a bunch of independent thinkers that were able to solve the problem, but I was also empowered to go down there. And I had a great CO who said, go do what you do, Lumpy. Like, we don't know what's going on down there. There's not good comms. There's not a good setup. There's not good infrastructure. We don't really know what's going on. The Coast Guard wasn't necessarily set up to go to the Bahamas and do a massive response. But I think being able to go down there and empower those individuals to not only have the skill set to make good risk assessment decisions and to understand their boundaries and how to push those when necessary, but letting them do it. That's hard because it's risky to higher echelons. And, in this culture of risk averse, like, some things are worth taking a risk and some things aren't. So it's really hard to find those moments where you can empower an individual to go down there or go on scene or with columns are difficult or situations difficult and make good decisions that may be beyond the scope of your particular rank or situation. It's very Marine Corps like your junior guy or gal making decisions because they can't get a hold of anybody else. So what's the end state trying to get to? So trying to empower those folks and be honest about it. Like, hey, this might happen to you in this situation. What would you do? It's important too in the helicopter world because we find ourselves in those situations quite often.
Yep. Bryan, last thought, and then I'll wrap us up.
I just want to thank Tony for being here and sharing all of his stories and lessons learned. I want to thank Jack for helping me co-host this. I felt like John telling me to do it was taking out my dad's car for the first time as a teenager, and I was terrified. So when you said you would come with me, I was relieved.
I was happy to be your first date.
Yeah. We survived.
Yeah, we did.
You did great, Bryan.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I just want to thank Tony as well. We knew from the resume and from Bryan's stories that this was a person we want to get on here, and your varied background was fantastic. But I took away a lot from this conversation, but I got to say that the things that I really are taking away that I want to make sure our listeners, hear from us is what we take away is, number one, you can have the best plan in the world, but as soon as the first shot's fired, that plan can go out the window. We've all heard that 100 times different ways. The first punch, the first bullet, the first this, first that, and then the plan goes away. It's true. If you don't believe that after listening to Tony in any of his stories, then you weren't listening to his stories because it's amazing.
I could tell them all over again if you want.
I know. Well, it's just amazing. And the second thing that I really want to emphasize is that the no, turning down that mission, it was clear how emotional you were. I mean, you could see it in you when you were talking about turning away from that, but it was the right thing to do. And there's a lot of examples of that. And over the years that people can look at, but a lot of people don't say no. Bryan brought it up and said there are funerals of the people that go, well, we'll do it. When they know deep and down inside that they should say no. It's hard. It's hard when you're in a law enforcement, public safety, medevac, Coast Guard, search and rescue, military, where there's consequences if you do say no. Well, that's part of the bargain here. It's part of the job, and you have to be able to say no. So I took a lot more out of it than that, Tony, but those are things that really impacted me and that I was really glad you were backing it up with stories and your real life experiences. Thanks for your service both times. Yeah. Scott Kellerman did the same thing. He went Navy to Coast Guard. It's a certain draw to that Coast Guard search and rescue. I understand. Yep. I do. It's very rewarding. But Tony, thanks a lot for joining us on the Hangar Z. Bryan, thank you very, very much for taking the lead on this and bringing Tony to us.
Thank you, Jeff.
And with that, I'll just say thanks to our listeners. We really appreciate you. We appreciate our sponsors to keep this going. Subscribe and like. And we really want you to stay safe. And hopefully conversations like this help you stay safe. So stay safe, and we'll catch you the next time on the Hangar Z Podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third-generation Night Sun series high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
We hope you enjoyed this episode with Tony Lumpy Lumpkin. His diverse flying career, from combat missions with the Marine Corps to high-risk rescues with the Coast Guard, demonstrates a deep commitment to aviation safety and a sound risk management. The flying experiences Tony and Bryan shared from Antarctica were especially captivating and serve as a powerful reminder of the challenges aviators can face in extreme environments. As I mentioned during the episode, being a true aviator means knowing when to say no to a mission. That kind of judgment can save lives. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there, and we'll catch you the next time on the Hangar Z Podcast.